What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Action Network podcast. I'm your host, Chris Raybon, and this is going to be our AFC training camp preview. I'm joined by one of the top, most accurate fantasy rankers in the game, one of the sharpest NFL experts on the planet, the odds maker, Sean Koerner. Sean, what's going on?
What's up? Yeah, I can't believe training camp is already starting, so I'm looking forward, the next few weeks, everyone overreacting to an amazing catch, myself included. I'm just excited to see some of these guys back in action. But how are you doing?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited for the preseason to get underway. I was just talking on the pod with Friedman how last preseason it took me about 5 snaps of Tank Dell for me to declare that he was the best Texans receiver. And I still believe that, even though Nico had a crazy season, but you definitely do glean stuff from, preseason training camp. And so excited to talk through each team with you. We're going to go through every team in the AFC and hit on a burning question or two for each team, kind of discuss, if you're a gambler, an invested sports fan, maybe even a fantasy player, what you need to know, what you need to be asking, what you need to be monitoring, what you need to be deciphering for each of these franchises. So let's jump right in. Let's start in the AFC East. Sean, when you look at the Buffalo Bills, what comes to mind first?
Yeah, so I think it's which wide receiver or wide receivers are going to step up with their top 2 receivers gone. Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis are on new teams. So, to break this down, I think the Bills became much more run heavy under new OC Joe Brady last year. I think that trend continues. I think they're going to continue to lean on the run a bit more now that they're lacking some of the pass catching talent. But their wide receiver depth chart is massive, and anything can really happen. I think Khalil Shakir, he has the most experience and chemistry with Josh Allen in this scheme. So I expect him to step up this year. I've always thought he's been sort of underrated, more of a slot guy, but I think he could step up and absorb, some of the targets left behind by Diggs. They also brought in Curtis Samuel, who could see quite a few targets from the slot as well. And they drafted second-round rookie Keon Coleman out of Florida, who could be like a big slot type of guy. So I just think they have a lot of like smaller slot guys. And then they brought in, a handful of really big outside receivers that could take over, some of the Gabe Davis downfield role with MVS, Chase Claypool, Matt Collins. In the end, I just think this is going to be just a spread out offense. I don't really think there's going to be an alpha receiver necessarily. And I think they spread it out to, running back James Cook, who's a very capable pass catching back, and Dalton Kincaid, who I think will be the number 1 target in this offense going forward, sort of like a Travis Kelce role in the Chiefs offense. So it's going to be a little bit different look, but I think it'll still work. I think Josh Allen under center still gives them a chance to go to playoffs, potentially make a Super Bowl run. But I just don't think we're going to see like an alpha player like Diggs or like a single deep threat like Gabe Davis. I think it's going to be much more spread out. But I'm excited to see which of these receivers potentially emerge.
Yeah, Stephon Diggs, 160 targets, 1,183 yards, and then Gabe Davis, another 81 targets and 746 yards. So you're talking about nearly 2,000 yards, 15 touchdowns between those two guys, vacated, and just over 240 targets. My early lean as to what I think is going to happen, if you're betting props or you want some kind of long shot or high upside guy, remember year 2 of George Kittle. He had a pretty decent rookie year, but he only caught 43 passes for 515 yards. So Kincaid had a better rookie year than Kittle. But remember year 2, but that was before they got Deebo Samuel, before they got Ayuk, and before obviously McCaffrey. Their number 1 receiver was Pierre Garçon. Their number 2 was Kendrick Bourne. Kittle had 88 catches for 1,377 yards. I think that's the kind of upside that Dalton Kincaid has this season. So I wouldn't be surprised if Kincaid, finishes as the tight end 1 in fantasy. I wouldn't be surprised if he just rips through his season long yardage prop. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's, among the league leaders in receiving, because, I think he's going to be the number 1 target for Josh Allen, and he's a tight end that can move inside, outside. He's kind of a big receiver. So that's how I see it shaking out. And if I had to pick a favorite for wide receivers, it'd probably be Khalil Shakir. And then, Coleman obviously is intriguing as, just because of the unknown, as an early round rookie. All right. The Miami Dolphins, my question when I look at Miami, they shored up the defense, obviously great coaching staff, great quarterback, great skill players, but for all this to work, they need to protect Tua. Remember, he had those concussion issues, and they need to keep humming so that running game could keep complementing, that explosive pass game. And they did lose Robert Hunt and Connor Williams. Now, Robert Hunt was ranked 6th out of 79 qualified guards at PFF, and Connor Williams was one of the highest graded interior linemen in the league as well. So, now it looks like James Brewer, Robert Jones are going to kind of take over there. So, that's kind of my biggest concern with Miami, besides, just the cold weather stuff later in the year and health is, do you think, in your projections, I guess I should ask, have you kind of factored in what could be a downgraded interior line for the Dolphins at all?
Not really. Tua does get rid of it quick, and he avoided, any concussions last year, thank God. And he lost like 10 to 15 pounds. So I think he's really doing all he can to kind of avoid taking big hits and get rid of it quickly. So I haven't really adjusted anything in my projections. But when it comes to like weekly projections, it could be a problem, especially not if, but when Teron Armstead does inevitably miss time. Seems like every year he misses a handful of games. That's when it probably could be a problem. You could see, the whole thing collapse. So that's something in season I'll be watching closely, but I haven't made any significant tweaks, for Tua's season-long projections. Have you?
Not a ton. I have, maybe docked him tiny bit in terms of the sack rate, or I shouldn't say docked, increased the sack rate a little bit, decreased the completion rate a little bit, just because, watching Tua, a lot of what they do is over the middle, and he needs to kind of see the passing lanes. And remember what happened to Bryce Young last year when, that terrible Carolina interior line. Well, now Hunt goes to Carolina, and Miami. I mean, Brewer and Jones both graded out much better in run blocking than pass blocking. So, I am kind of monitoring that, and I'll be kind of looking at the camp reports and seeing if those guys are holding up, because that can significantly impact the Dolphins offense, especially if then, like you said, Armstead ends up missing time as well. That would just compound matters. Yeah. All right, what are we thinking with the New England Patriots?
Yeah, so I think, with the Patriots, I'm pondering, Jacoby Brissett versus Drake May, and how each quarterback will sort of impact their power rating for, point spreads. The Drake May pick was interesting. The Patriots took him 3rd overall, but he landed in the worst situation of all of the first-round quarterbacks. He's on a team with a first-year head coach with Gerard Mayo. They're moving on from Bill Belichick, which is a pretty significant move. They have a very shaky offensive line and arguably the worst wide receiver room in the league. So it's just not a great situation. You don't really like throwing a rookie out in that kind of situation. I remember Josh Rosen trying to play behind that horrible offensive line, just kind of derailed his career. So they got to be careful with him, but I think he does have a ton of upside. He kind of reminds me of a mix between like Justin Herbert and Carson Wentz. Hopefully he ends up closer to the Justin Herbert version of that comp, but he's still fairly raw, and he probably needs some time to develop. So this is not a great situation to just throw him out there week 1. The Jacoby Brissett is, I would say he's an above average backup quarterback. More than capable to just kind of keep the ship barely afloat. out there, but he's obviously not good enough to overcome the lack of talent in this situation. So it really comes down to, when would it make sense to kind of have May take over? And unfortunately, the Patriots don't have a bye until week 14, and they have a pretty tough early season schedule. So there's a chance that Brissett starts, half the season or even more. So when it comes to like how do we kind of project this team if and when Drake May takes over, sometimes in a situation like this, I'll actually lower the team's power rating by a point or two, I guess, depending on how well Jacoby Brissett is playing. But I think they're going to want to get May out there. If he's just thrown out there in week 3 because Brissett's hurt, I would probably, drop the Patriots power rating a point or so. If he's replacing Brissett in week 7 because the coaching staff feels he's ready to go, it's probably going to be more of a lateral move. But either way, he's a quarterback I'm going to be watching very closely in preseason because, like I said, he's still raw. He needs, to develop. So maybe he's solid out of the gate, and I can up his, QB power rating. But this is a situation where, as long as Jacoby Brissett is under center, I think he'll be a slight upgrade over May. But this is something I think we'll get a little bit more clarity on with how he performs in preseason.
Yeah, I agree. I think to start the year, I would have Brissett about a point higher, just because there's uncertainty now. If we get some clarity, if May gets a ton of snaps in the preseason, then we can kind of adjust from there. But I think something that goes a little bit underlooked with Jacoby Brissett is that he played very well in Alex Van Pelt's offense in 2022 with the Cleveland Browns, 7.1 yards an attempt, 12 touchdowns, 6 picks, 64% completion, a 62 QBR, which is very good. And Van Pelt is the new offensive coordinator in New England. And to a man, every single offensive lineman projected to start, Okorafor, Strange, Andrews, Sal, Onwenu, all 5 of them are better run blockers than pass blockers. So that I think is another concern for a rookie quarterback and kind of favors the more experienced guy. You mentioned the tough schedule, but I do think this team is going to try to remain run heavy and try to just, bridge the gap. Remember Van Pelt, very run heavy, even though he wasn't calling the plays. He was part of a very run heavy offense with Stefanski in Cleveland these last few years. So that's probably the model for how, this offense is going to look and with Brissett. But I wouldn't be surprised if Brissett, starts more games than Drake May because, Brissett played very well in 2022 and he played well in the limited action we saw of him in Washington last year. So, I think Brissett deserved to be about at least a point for now higher than Drake May. The New York Jets. This is going to be quite the fascinating team. Aaron Rodgers, I think that's the biggest question. How much of his old self are we expecting at the other side of 40, coming off an Achilles injury? And, since, you are the most accurate projector, I'm just going to ask you in terms of projections. I mean, Aaron Rodgers was always a guy who yards per attempt for his career extremely high, 7.7 career average. However, in his last full season with Green Bay, 6.8, and then they let him go, and then he gets hurt. So where are you on his, efficiency, particularly, his yards per attempt in this new offense in his age 41 season, coming off the injury, but with a, improved offensive line?
So I have it right around 7.3.
That's high. That is high.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you're bullish on Rodgers.
I don't know if I'd say bullish, but I can't wait to see him throwing the ball to Garrett Wilson. I brought up that stat to you on our pod that he's only thrown 1 touchdown to a first-round draft pick. Now, Devontae Adams played like a first-round draft pick, but still, I can't wait to see Garrett Wilson with a competent quarterback under center. But like kind of what you're mentioning is, we already saw some decline with Rodgers in his age 39 season in Green Bay, and now he just had a year to sit. So now he's 41. So I'm really curious to see if that decline was real or if he bounces back. So I guess I don't have the answer to that, but I think he has a decent, pass catching group around him. I did like that they brought in Mike Williams, as a deep threat, and I love Garrett Wilson. So we'll see how he looks in this offense. I never thought that this was like a good move for Aaron Rodgers. I loved his fit in Green Bay, but yeah, I guess I have him at 7.3, so that's a bit bullish. But I think he's still got it at 41, but we have been seeing some decline from him toward the last couple seasons.
Yeah, I have it about a little bit under 7, kind of similar to what he did that last year with Green Bay. I don't, it's hard. There's really no comps, hardly any quarterback plays until this point. And if you do, you have like a survivor bias because they're all essentially probably Hall of Famers for the most part. But, for my aging curve, I kind of take the data, for where we do have a lot of data, and then I essentially create a regression where I can just plug in, an older age and kind of get the, projected decline. And I do, my numbers are showing, yards per attempt, based, off his baseline, you probably knock that down about 0.1 to 0.2. Same thing for the touchdown rate. You probably knock it down 5% or so. So yeah, I'm a little more conservative. And also I think this defense is going to be very good. And Breece Hall and the running game is going to be good. So I don't think Rodgers is going to need to, throw it all around the yard. I think he's just going to kind of, do what he does and check it down a lot and just keep it humming. And, if they win a lot of 17 to 13 games, I think they'll be happy with that. But, that is the question. And, there is probably some unrealized downside. Everyone loves Aaron Rodgers and excited to see how this pans out, but you still got Hackett there. You still got a lot of, internal turmoil, and, if things start going bad early, it could snowball. So definitely a situation I'm monitoring because I want to see just how, if the more we can kind of gather on how well Rodgers is doing, and he probably won't play any preseason or not much. But I think that's going to be very important to kind of project in the Jets this year, obviously. All right, let's flip it. Let's go from the East Coast to the West Coast. Let's start with the back-to-back Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs. What are you thinking, Sean?
Yeah, so just, will the Chiefs offense be more explosive this year? Specifically, Patrick Mahomes downfield passing last year. Mahomes ranked 15th in terms of completions, 15 plus yards down the field. Lowest rank he's seen in his career. First time he's ranked outside of the top 10 in that stat. And I think a lot of that had to do with just MVS and Justin Watson being his top 2 downfield threats. We remember, poking at them quite a bit last year. It was just a really bad situation. So I think they remedied it by bringing in Marquise Brown and drafted Xavier Worthy in the first round to help give him better weapons downfield. And, Brown, he's established speedy wide receiver who's proven, he's capable downfield target with his time in Baltimore and then in Arizona. Saw a clip of, speaking of overreacting to clips, I saw a clip of Mahomes hitting Brown deep. It was a pretty ball, pretty catch in camp. So that's good to see that they're already connecting downfield. But I'm also excited to see Xavier Worthy in this offense. He set the combine record with a 4.21 40 time, just has some serious speed and, will be a nice downfield target for Mahomes. And, both wide receivers will probably have to step up early in the season. I'm just bracing ourselves for Rashee Rice getting some sort of multi-game suspension. So really going to need these two guys to step up. But I think it's safe to say that with both these wide receivers, we should see some of those explosive plays downfield come back to this Chiefs offense.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at it last year, it was a very unique situation. The Chiefs' best receiver is always going to be Travis Kelce. He's, an tight end. So, underneath to intermediate over the middle target. Then Rashee Rice was their second best receiver. He is generally an underneath target. And Isaiah Pacheco, I would argue, is their third best pass catcher, or I mean, if you want to say McKinnon, whatever running back is in the game. So every one of Mahomes's, best options were underneath guys last year. Now this year you had Brown and you had Worthy to take the lid off outside and to, stretch the field deep. So that just opens back up the offense. So, and if you have Rice suspended and Kelsey getting older, it actually might flip. You might see Mahomes be more downfield oriented than he's been in at least since Tyreek Hill left. So, I think that this is a recipe for success because you got guys now that can actually get open at all of the spots instead of concentrating them toward the middle of the field. I mean, we all remember Kadarius Toney and then Hardman in the playoffs. I know he had a great Super Bowl, but I mean, between Toney, Hardman, and Sky Moore, it was just a black hole. And Watson was probably the best of the bunch. And MVS, he came up big late, of course he did, because that's what the Chiefs do. They win Super Bowls. But statistically speaking, I think the additions of Brown and Worthy completely change the tenor of this offense. Chargers, Harbaugh is the coach. Greg Roman is the offensive coordinator. My question is, how good will the pass offense be? Because we know when we're, creating our power ratings for betting and whatnot, passing is going to factor in a lot more than running, even in a run heavy offense. Justin Herbert, still, I think, one of the better quarterbacks in the league. But Greg Roman, known to be run heavy. You lost Keenan Allen, you lost Mike Williams, and you lost Austin Eckler. So you got Josh Palmer, you got Ladd McConkey, you got DJ Chark, and you got Quentin Johnston now at receiver, Disley at tight end, with Hayden Hurst, and the running backs are Dobbins and Edwards weren't factors in the pass game, and then rookie Kamani Vidal. So, when it's a lot of moving parts, but when it's all said and done, how efficient and how much can his pass game contribute to winning football games for the Chargers compared to years past?
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be an interesting team to watch, right out of the gate. And, I love Ladd McConkey as a prospect, but they're really thin at receiver. And it goes without saying, but Quentin Johnston really has to have year 2 leap. He was very disappointing as a rookie. I thought he was kind of raw, but like he really flopped, but he could have a bounce back in year 2, and that would really help. That would go a long way with their passing attack. But I think you're right. I think they're going to be a much more run heavy, maybe lower scoring games type of offense. And they're going to be a run heavy team, but we don't even know who's going to get the most carries in this offense. It could be Gus Edwards, could be J.K. Dobbins, could be Kamani Vidal. So a lot of interesting moving parts here where they're a really tricky team to project right now.
Yeah, and then you're also the defense is undergoing transformation because you had that Staley defense. I'm hearing trade rumors with Bosa, which could be big. You still got Khalil Mack, and you still got Derwin James and Samuel at corner. But yeah, this pass offense, I'm really curious. Right now, I have Herbert for around 235 yards per game, so pretty significant decrease from his career averages. The Denver Broncos, another team, offense should look a little bit different this year. What are you looking at with them?
Just who emerges as the starting quarterback. Could be a 3-way race between Bo Nix, Jared Stidham, and now Zach Wilson is in the mix. I would think that Bo Nix is the heavy favorite to win the week 1 starting job and start, as long as he's healthy. Why not this year? But he might have been a bit of a reach at number 12 overall, but the Broncos obviously didn't want to risk him potentially not making it to round 2 or figuring out how to trade down. So they just took him 12th overall. I think he's probably one of the most NFL ready quarterbacks. He started 61 games in college, the most ever by a quarterback. So he doesn't need more reps or anything. So if he looks decent enough in training camp and in preseason, I think he wins the job. It wouldn't make sense really to start Jared Stidham week 1. I don't really know what his ceiling would even be, but I think they just want to get Bo Nix out there and start getting him reps. If Zach Wilson were to start, he just really lit up camp, lit up preseason, and maybe just his time at the Jets was just a bad fit or something. So he'll be interesting to watch as well. But the way I see this unfolding is, Bo Nix does at least the bare minimum to land the week 1 starting job, and he will be their starting quarterback this year as long as he's healthy.
Yeah, and I think Bo Nix, probably gives him the best chance to win. Zach Wilson's terrible, so I'm not even
Well, we all know
considering
that.
him. I mean, he's absolutely awful. Like if Sean Payton can even turn him into a respectable backup, that is just amazing work by Payton. But obviously, they took Bo Nix because Payton wants a quarterback, and he's going to do everything in his power. I think to get Nix ready, and if for some reason he's not, I think they're comfortable with Stidham, who's he's not terrible. Like Zach Wilson's terrible. Jarrett Stidham's just a normal, run of the mill backup. Like he's not awful. Like he's had some awful games, he's had some decent games, but Zach Wilson, if he emerges as the starting quarterback, I mean, just put Sean Payton in the Hall of Fame right now, because that would be amazing. Speaking of quarterback situations, we have the Raiders with a quarterback battle. Aiden O'Connell, second-year man versus veteran Gardner Minshew. Last season, believe it or not, O'Connell and Minshew, same completion percentage, 62%. Yards per attempt, O'Connell 6'5", Minshew 6'7". The touchdown rates, 3.5% for O'Connell, 3.1%. Minshew, the same exact sack rate, but Minshew had a QBR of 60. O'Connell had a QBR of 40. So, I think there was some, that kind of matches the eye test. I think, Minshew, even though the numbers don't look great, he's a little bit haphazard, but he tended to get it done. And he pulled some throws out of his ass in the red zone and connected when he had to. So, which of these two do you have these guys just rated equally in your power ratings, or is there a slight edge to one or the other?
Yeah, they're pretty even. I guess it depends what you're trying to accomplish. I think that Aiden O'Connell, I was pretty high on him this time last year, especially how well he showed out in preseason. He reminds me of Jameis Winston, where he has a very wide range of outcomes. He can make some really great throws and just some ugly plays. I remember his debut. He just absolutely killed me. He took like 8 or 9 sacks, fumbled it a few times. That. That's just how he is. So like if you're the Raiders will be the underdog most of the time. So I would say that it would make sense for them to kind of want to leverage Jameis Winston, volatile type of quarterback to give him a chance. Whereas, Minshew's similar, but he's more, we kind of know what to expect with Minshew, probably one of the worst starting quarterbacks in the league. But he's not terrible. So I think that it would make the most sense to just let Aiden O'Connell let it rip in year 2. Maybe he breaks out, maybe he doesn't. But you're in a situation right now, you need to figure it out. And if you flop, then you get a really high draft pick next year and can take your quarterback of the future. I think ultimately they got screwed over. I think they were really planning on Michael Penix falling to them. I thought it was going to happen, and just the Falcons destroyed that plan. So they're just going into the season, just with these two quarterbacks, not much to gain from it. And I just think that you have more to gain by letting Aiden O'Connell out there, letting it rip. If he's terrible, you at least have Gardner Minshew to put it in there. So while I have them equal in power rating, I still think Aiden O'Connell at least has the higher ceiling.
Yeah, I think O'Connell has a higher ceiling. Minshew has the higher floor. So, as of right now, I still have Minshew a few tenths of a point ahead of O'Connell. If O'Connell balls out in preseason and decidedly wins the job before week 1, then I'd probably equal him out, or maybe even bump O'Connell. But as of now, just my raw projections do have Minshew a little bit ahead. I think he can be a solid caretaker, whereas because O'Connell has that high ceiling, he also has there's you can get one of those 4 touchdown, what was that, 60, 70 points against the Charger game, or you can get the other Charger game where he took 10 sacks, and this Raider team, they want to play defense. They want to run the football. It's a whole different identity from what we're used to with the Raiders under Antonio Pierce. So I think they'll throw just because they have Adams and because Bowers fell into their lap. But I don't think this is going to be a pass first team by any means. And I don't think O'Connell will make that big of a leap to make them a pass first team. So as of now, slight edge to Minshew. But as far as the season long game started, I actually have O'Connell starting one more game. I have it 9-8, so, and I'll adjust that as we get, more information, but I kind of essentially my naive model right now. Cause I don't think anybody really knows, we can kind of speculate.
I don't know if you saw, like, a lot of books have that week one starting quarterback market. And, Minshew is pretty heavily favored. I think he was up to like minus 200 to start week one. And now O'Connell's the favorite at most books, around minus 150. So something has happened where it looks more likely that O'Connell would start week one. And that, like, he's the kind of quarterback, once he starts, they probably want to stick with him as long as possible. So I've actually flipped it where I have O'Connell starting like 10 games and Minshew 7.
Yeah.
But we're just guessing at this point. But yeah, I've been kind of like, fudging them like every other day, just watching that market and trying to keep up with the news. But right, it's basically a coin flip. But they have probably one of the closest QB battles heading into camp.
Oh, definitely the closest. And I think the reason the market flipped was I read something from a quote from Devontae Adams saying, I think O'Connell's got the edge right now, and he was here last year, and whatnot. So I think that's probably what flipped the market. But at the same time, you still have some veterans like a Devontae Adams on that team, and so if O'Connell's struggling, I think they wouldn't hesitate to go to Minshew, because Adams, I think his opinion and his leadership just carries a lot of weight in that locker room. Now, if he gets traded, then all bets are off.
Then who matters? Who cares?
Right. But hey, Zamir White, I like Zamir White. That's we Friedman and I just talked about him on the pod that will be dropping, on the Action Network pod that will be dropping in a bit, and we both have him over 100 yards over his season-long rushing prop, which I believe is in the 700s. I think we both are close to 900. So that's kind of who I expect to break out in that offense. But let's jump to the AFC South. The Indianapolis Colts almost got into the playoffs last year, lost that Week 18 game in a thriller to the Texans on the Goodson drop. What are you thinking for the Colts this year? It seems like it's something related to that Goodson drop.
Speaking of Goodson, so who will emerge as Jonathan Taylor's backup? And normally the answer to that question didn't matter, and it probably still doesn't, because JT just never missed time. He apparently never missed practice or a game in his entire life until last season, where he ended up missing a handful of games. Luckily, they had Zach Moss there, who really stepped up, and he looked incredible in the offense. They didn't miss a beat without JT, but now, Moss is in Cincinnati now. So it remains to be seen which back will potentially become the new number 2 back. It's between Trey Sermon, Evan Hull, and Tyler Goodson. Goodson, as you mentioned, was the back who infamously dropped the pass to end the Colts season in a must-win game for the Texans. It was a bizarre play. I remember you were frustrated about it as well, where they took Taylor off the field for that play.
He was hurt. He was hurt.
Well,
so
he was hurt.
We found out later that he played that whole drive at like a bum ankle, and then
he made it that far. At least be a decoy or something. Like it was just really bizarre. And so Goodson's in the mix. Maybe he wants to, have some revenge from that play, but I probably have him the least likely of the crew to become the new number 2 back. Evan Hull was their 5th round pick last year. Didn't play much. He only had 1 rush for 1 yard, but even in the preseason, he didn't look great. Averaged just 3.1 yards per carry. So my bet is on Trey Sermon to win the backup job. And he has a very similar career arc to Zach Moss, where he was drafted in the 3rd round by his original team, didn't pan out with his original team, the Niners. But then he looked a lot better in this Colts scheme. Last year, he had 35 carries, averaged 4.6 yards per attempt. So I think he's probably the most likely back to kind of be the Zach Moss number 2 role. And as we saw last year, that is important because, as it turns out, Jonathan Taylor is human and he can miss time. So I think it's important that they at least have a viable number 2 back emerge from this trio. So it'll just be interesting to see how this shapes out.
Yeah, and the Colts have one of the best offensive lines in the league. Smith and Raymond both graded out top 7 at PFF among tackles, and you got Nelson on the inside. You got Kelly at center. So very, very good offensive line. So that could end up being relevant at some point. But I wonder if they'd sign a free agent, because I've seen the buzz about Sermon, and that he is that kind of that next man up in terms of the carries. But I at the same time, what gives me pause is down the stretch last year, the whole reason Goodson was even involved at all was because Sermon kind of started. Well, not started, but once midseason hit and Taylor and Moss were back in the fold, Sermon was that number 3 back after Hull. I think Hull played one game, got hurt. Sermon was that number 3 back, and then down the stretch, he started getting scratched, and they started keeping Goodson active. So that's the only thing that gives me pause, because it still is the same coaching staff. So I wonder if you see like a Miles Sanders trade, or maybe a Kareem Hunt or something like that. If they're worried about that role, because I mean, it would seem like a shame to just go into the year with Trey Sermon, Evan Hull, and and Tyler Goodson behind Jonathan Taylor. With as good as your offensive line is, you might, Richardson's durability is in question. He's the number 2 back. But I could see them trying to do something to make a move for another veteran. Them and the Cowboys, I'm on high alert. For them. But and I mean, we'll move on. But another question, my biggest question for the Colts is, are their cornerbacks going to hold up? Like, you got who is it? Juju Brents and Jalen Johnson projected to start on the outside. That could get ugly, especially you got to play Houston twice, you got to play Jacksonville twice. So and Tennessee with Ridley and Hopkins on the outside. So that's not suddenly not the division to have 2 shaky outside corners. Moore is always good, but he's an interior guy. So that's my biggest question for the Colts, in addition to what they ended up doing behind Taylor. Texans, speaking of cornerbacks, we know the offense is going to be great. We know Stroud is great. If you don't think Stroud is great, just go watch him. Look at the numbers, maybe. Yeah, I mean, they're great, but just go watch a few plays. I mean, this guy, the anticipation, the accuracy, and the arm strength, ridiculous. And so I don't really have many questions about this offense, but I think the whole for me is that number 2 corner spot. Derek Stingley was great last year. Steven Nelson was also very good, but he retired. So he graded out number 29 of 127 corners at PFF last year, did Nelson. Now you're trying to replace him with a rookie in Kamari Lassiter, who could be very good. But if he doesn't, if he kind of starts slow, and sometimes not, like, rookie cornerbacks don't always play well in year one. I mean, even Stingley, I don't think played all that great in year one. Okuda never really panned out. So, any thoughts as to, how that's going to kind of shape up? Because I mentioned it, this division suddenly has a pretty decent crop of perimeter receivers. Now the Colts got Pittman and Mitchell.
It's a tough situation. Lassiter, he had a pretty rough combine. He was expected to go in the first round, pretty rough combine, so he fell in the second round. A lot of pressure on him this year, so it'll be interesting to see. I think that the defensive line, like Will Anderson stepping up this year, getting, ton of pressure will help the secondary. So I think they're going to ask defensive line to help out there. But as you kind of alluded to, this division has a lot of good receivers. And we were talking about the Colts, but the Colts have good receivers too. So this is a division where you definitely want to have strong quarterback play. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this shapes out.
All right. The next team is the Jacksonville Jaguars in the AFC South. What are you thinking with the Jags? Finished with a winning record last year, but it was not really the season they hoped for. Missed the playoffs. Trevor Lawrence missed a couple of games. What are you kind of thinking about for Jacksonville?
Just will Trevor Lawrence take the next step? Because, after the 2022 season, he finished 7th in EPA per play. He really looked like he was about to become the elite quarterback. He was expected to be, but then last season he really dropped off, finished 24th in EPA per play. And as you alluded to, he was dealing with some pretty significant injuries. Props to him for playing through some of them. But it's still disappointing to see him take that big of a drop off right when you think he's going to break out. So, he's still 24 He's entering year 4, so he could still, end up being a top 5, top 10 quarterback in the league. And I think this year will be a pretty key moment in that. I guess it doesn't matter for the Jags. They already invested in him, 275 million for 5 years. So for their investment, they're just hoping that this year he does, take that leap that we saw in 2022. But that's something I'll be looking for, is if he can really make the case that he's one of the elite quarterbacks in the league, because we've seen glimpses of it, but he just hasn't been consistent. And they really need that to happen for them to be like a Super Bowl contender type team.
Yeah, I think he played better than his numbers last year. He only threw 21 passing touchdowns, had a touchdown rate under 4. But there are a lot of near misses. I do think, and the same concerns hold true this year. He was I think he was kind of at his best when he had that crew with Kirk and Ingram and the Joneses, Zay and Marvin, the veterans. And now it just seems like every year they're kind of switching up the receivers outside of Kirk and Ingram. And last year, the chemistry with Ridley was touch and go, even though Ridley's a talented player. And now you're looking at a rookie in Brian Thomas Jr. that, could be an upgrade in the long term and their answer. But, that there's some kind of downside there with, they could not be on the same page to start. And also Gabe Davis is a guy who, very, workman-like receiver, great deep threat, but also a guy who makes a ton of mistakes and, known to drop a lot of passes. So you could see another kind of underwhelming season for Lawrence. And, maybe he just settles in as like a top, like, 10 to 15 guy instead of the, top
slightly above
6
average
guy. Right. And he'll pop, he'll have, like, remember how Matt Ryan had that big Super Bowl year? So at some point, I don't doubt that Trevor Lawrence will pop. But this year, just with all the newness at receiver, at on the perimeter, not my favorite, situation for Lawrence to just have a ceiling year. But I will say I do think he played better than what his numbers were a season ago. Tennessee Titans, new look. Brian Callahan comes over from the Cincinnati Bengals, former offensive coordinator there. Now he's the head coach in Tennessee. So this will be an offense crafted in his image. They upgraded the skill positions, added Calvin Ridley alongside Hopkins. They added Tony Pollard alongside Tajay Spears, and Derrick Henry's now in Baltimore. But overall, I think the skill position players are pretty solid. Tyler Boyd is there. Treylon Burks, hearing some positive buzz from him out of camp. But as we've been worried with Tennessee for these last few years, it seems like, what is going to be of the tackle situation? Like how well can these guys protect Will Levis? Because I think if they can protect Will Levis, the skill position players, he's gonna, and he can sling it. Like, they're gonna have some success. But you have a rookie, high draft pick J.C. Lathan slotted in at left tackle, and then Nicholas Petit-Frere, hope I pronounced that right, who was just terrible last year, a 35.5 PFF grade, 27.7 pass blocking, one of the worst tackles, if not the worst graded tackle in the league. So this is another situation where the offensive line could end up impacting the fantasy production, real life production of this passing game. What do you think about the O-line, specifically the tackles for the Titans?
They're probably going to be one of the worst offensive lines in the league again, but I did like the Latham pick. Peter Skoronski was pretty solid as a rookie. Like, he's only going to get better. And I guess the offensive line, they've been such a run-heavy team with Derrick Henry the last handful of years. I do agree that they're going to have to switch to more, pass protection. This will probably be a more pass-heavy offense, which will be a new look. So it's going to be a different ask from the offensive line. So it'll be interesting to see how it shapes out. I still think that, again, they're going to be one of the worst offensive lines, and, make it really tough for Levis. So, hopefully they can scheme up plays to kind of get rid of the ball quickly or something like that. But I still think that there's a lot of concerns about this offensive line.
Yeah, I think the guy I'm really going to be watching is Latham, because if he can hit the ground running, it changes the whole tenor of this offensive line, because you did pick up Lloyd Cushenberry III at center in free agency. He graded out as a top 10 center last year, top 3 in pass blocking. So that, having quality player at the pivot, and then, you mentioned Skoronski, who pretty good in, I'd say, a plus interior lineman. Mm-hmm. And then, Brunskill is kind of a veteran journeyman, but he's also, I would say, average at worst, average, maybe slightly above. So if they can get Latham playing well, then the only weakness really is right tackle. And you can do some things with, you can leave the tight end in the block or running back, because you have those 3 wide receivers that you're going to be wanting to throw to. So I think if we hear positive reports out of camp on Latham, I think that changes a lot. And I think then that's the path to Tennessee being, a solid offensive line. But if he struggles in year one, like a Evan Neal or something like that, then it's going to be an issue.
I mean, he played right tackle in college, and they're going to ask him to play left tackle.
Yep.
Which is kind of annoying. I was kind of hoping, Joe Alt would end up in Tennessee and Latham would end up in Chargers. But, there's a lot of annoying things about the draft. But that would have been a better fit for both teams. But, he's going to have to learn a new position, essentially, on the left side, which can cause some problems like we've seen in the past.
All right, let's go to the AFC North, a.k.a. the AFC Central, was it back in the day that you always make fun of me because I called it that one time?
Atlantic Division?
Nah, I didn't say that. I definitely said the Central, which was the actual football division. I know, come on, I know my basketball from my football, but no. So let's start with the Steelers. How are they going to find a way to 9 wins they need to keep the Tomlin streak going? How are they going to do that? And what's your biggest question mark for Pittsburgh?
Yeah, just, will Justin Fields at least challenge Russ Wilson for the starting quarterback job? And it sounds like the chances are pretty slim for Fields to actually beat out, healthy Russ Wilson to be the team's week 1 starter. Wilson, his brief stint in Denver was a disaster. But the Steelers will probably want to see if they can somehow regain his form from Seattle, where he was on track to be a potential, Hall of Fame quarterback. So I think this is Russell Wilson's job to lose. Now, in season, if he starts struggling, it's going to be relevant that the backup is Justin Fields, arguably the best backup quarterback entering week 1. So I think that's when we might see some, controversy surrounding it. So I'm not expecting too much of a battle necessarily in training camp or preseason, but, preseason will be the time for Justin Fields to really showcase, his development. I believe this is his 3rd or 4th year. But that will be his time to really prove it on the field, that he's taking that next step. But I think in season, this could be interesting, again, if Russell Wilson struggles in this new scheme and Justin Fields is, waiting to come in. But yeah, this is one of the more fascinating QB rooms in the league. Unfortunately, I think they decide on Russell Wilson starting week 1, but still, this is something I'm going to be watching throughout camp and throughout the season very closely.
Yeah, I feel like the Steelers and Russell Wilson is like, when you're a bachelor and you're at a bar and it's like close to closing time and you're just looking around and you just grab anyone you can and get out of there. And I feel like that's Russell Wilson to them, but that's going to wear off at some point. And personally, like just my objective, evaluation, I thought in many ways Justin Fields was better than Russell Wilson last year. I thought most of Russell Wilson's successes I would credit to Sean Payton and him kind of essentially hiding Wilson and making it so that offense could be, functional without Wilson just torpedoing it. But I mean, Fields has his warts, his processing speed is very slow, but I think he's a better mover at this point. I think he's a better and I actually think he's got more upside as a thrower because Russell Wilson just has gone into a shell. I mean, he takes a look at his first read. If it's not there, it's like he's looking down at the ground, or it's not even always running. He always gets lost in a bunch of bodies around the line of scrimmage. I mean, So yes, my answer to your question is yes. At some point, Fields will, but it'll probably take longer than it should, just like it took longer than it should
Right.
For the Steelers to make a change at offensive coordinator. The Cincinnati Bengals, they have that last place schedule this year after the Burrow injury, but solid all around team. I think in prime position to challenge the Chiefs for AFC supremacy here, along with the Texans and a few others. But do they have enough at pass catcher after Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? I mean, this is usually you had dependable guys like Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon. You had like veteran tight ends like Hurst and Smith and whatnot, and now you got Burton the rookie, Yosevas second year man, Jones second year man at wide receiver, tight end. I mean Gesicki never really panned out. You still got Sample, Hudson. You drafted a couple of rookies, and then the backfield you have Zach Moss and Chase Brown. Brown's good in the screen game, but overall. I do think there are some question marks at pass catcher. So do you think Burrow is just going to kind of make somebody into a star, or not a star, but into a great third option, or are the Bengals kind of spread a little thin here behind Chase and T. Higgins?
No, I think they have enough, and honestly, that's all that matters. You already have one of the best wide receiver duos in the league, and Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, so it doesn't matter too much. But I like Jermaine Burton as a rookie. He only went in the third round because of some off-field concerns, but he probably could have gone early second round based on talent alone. Yosevas, if you remember last year, I was excited for him for potentially replacing Higgins in this offense this year. So he could be a solid number 3 receiver. Charlie Jones as well, pretty good slot guy. He was coming back from a torn labrum last year. I considered that a redshirt season. So they have plenty of guys to step up. I just hope to God that Trent Irwin isn't the guy. Please get him out of there. Tight end, it seems like every year they have a new, kind of has-been guy that probably still has some upside at tight end, and Mike Gesicki. I think he could pan out in this offense. I've been waiting for Gesicki to get to a more tight end-friendly scheme. So, yeah, I think they have enough. And as long as Chase and Higgins are both healthy, I don't think it'll matter. But, if Chase or Higgins goes down, that's when the depth will obviously matter. And I think guys like Yosevas, Burton, and Charlie Jones can step up. Because Tyler Boyd, he was obviously a solid number 3 receiver, but the last couple seasons he has been showing some signs of decline, and they've been just fine. So I think this is still an offense that's going to be supported by Joe Burrow, and he'll make some of these guys, better receivers just based on being an excellent quarterback.
It's going to be Irwin. Like we know it. It's going to be Irwin. We know it. And I mean,
hope not.
Good for him. Baltimore. What are you thinking with the Ravens, who came a game plan away from going to the Super Bowl?
Yeah. Well, that sets up my question perfectly. Is just how will this offense look with Derrick Henry? One of the best running backs of the past decade is now on the Ravens, and it seems to be of their way of admitting their mistake of not running the ball against the Chiefs at all in the playoffs last year. I know that killed your Gus prop. It was looking good, but they just abandoned the run. I have no clue why they did that, but having Henry in this offense is a game changer, I think. Defenses already have a hard enough time trying to contain Lamar Jackson, but now having to worry about Derrick Henry back there could open things up in the running and passing game for both players. So I just love this fit. And plus, the Ravens are a team that tend to be leading more often than not. And that's really when Henry thrives. So, they can really open up the playbook with the lead, build off play action. This is a fantastic fit for both sides. And, I mentioned in our fantasy pod that I estimated Henry would have had 4 to 5 more rushing touchdowns last year in this offense. So, I think he's going to get more goal line chances. Lamar Jackson isn't a quarterback they tend to use a lot around the goal line. A lot of his touchdowns are longer runs. So I think this is just a great fit for Henry in terms of fantasy purposes, in terms of real life purposes. And maybe this will incentivize the Ravens to actually run the ball when there's a situation where that does make sense.
Yeah, it's the Ravens have a wide range of outcomes this year. I think last year was the year to kind of invest in them. Now, because they kind of struggled the year before, and they were able to kind of bounce back. Now I think the Bengals are in that position. I do have questions about the offensive line. Can Ronnie Stanley stay healthy? You lost some guys on the interior. You got Rosengarten probably starts at right tackle. How well is he going to play? And then, cornerback is also an issue. So, the game scripts could go a lot of different ways. I'm also curious do you think they're going to use more two tight end sets? It would seem if you're going with more run game and Henry, you might also want to get the two tight ends, Likely and Andrews, on the field, because I think that's better than, trotting out Aguilar or Deontay Hardy or whoever it would be, at the number 3 receiver, unless Devontae Walker breaks out early in his career and takes one of the spots on the outside. But do you think there's going to be more? We're going to get more Likely this year?
Yeah, I think that would make a ton of sense. I have to think about all the depth charts, but I would say he's the best backup tight end in all of football. So that would make sense to kind of tailor the offense that way. They also need Rashad Bateman to finally break out. He was a highly touted prospect, hasn't really panned out quite yet. But if he were to break out some 2 wide receiver sets, 2 tight end sets, with Henry back there, I think that would definitely make a ton of sense.
Yeah, like the Ravens, they kind of scare me a little bit. I don't know. I think I'm a little lower than the market on them just because I feel like there's a lot of things that can kind of, or there's like last year there was like more things that can go right than wrong, and you had the new offense and catch everyone off guard, and Lamar ends up winning the MVP. But now it's like, yeah, Henry, great addition, great fit, but he's 30. Can he hold up? The line has questions, the corners have questions, so you might not be in as many positive game scripts. It's a lot of different ways this could go. So that's a team I'll be monitoring, but I'll probably be fading them more often than not this year.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not saying I would bet the over on the win total or something, but I think as long as Lamar stays healthy, they'll be fine.
That's another thing.
They lost Tyler Huntley. They have Josh Johnson and then 2 quarterbacks. I couldn't even tell you a thing about them. So they just really need him to stay healthy now, because in years past, Huntley was okay. He'd right the ship for a little bit, but they definitely cannot afford Lamar to miss any time this year.
And he's kind of made it a habit of doing that. That's another reason I think there's a lot of downside for the Ravens this year, when you're kind of, you have to kind of buy them a little higher, almost top of the market, because they almost went to the Super Bowl last year. So yeah, that's just how I'm looking at the Ravens, at least for now, as we head into camp. And let's close it out with the Cleveland Football Browns. Deshaun Watson. I mean, I've asked you this before. Is he broken, or 6.5 yards per attempt in 2022 coming back, and then 6.5 yards per attempt last year on 170 attempts in both years. The completion rate right around 60 overall, 4.1% touchdown rate, just nowhere near the numbers that he put up in Houston. You do have Judy, you do have, Cooper's getting a little older, but he was a monster last year. Njoku was a monster, but everyone played better without Watson for the most part. So, what are your thoughts on Watson? And, is he in a tough division, can he regain form, and can he lead this team, to a playoff berth or a potential division title?
I mean, who knows? That's the question, right? But, by most metrics, he was, outside the top 20 in quarterbacks, and that just won't do it based on his contract. And, Joe Flacco looked totally fine in this offense. He was incredible. So it's not the scheme. It's not the pass catchers. It's got to be Watson, whether that's, rust physically or just, mentally from how long he was away and, why he was away remains to be seen. But this is certainly a make or break year for him, because if he doesn't get going this year, it's got to be him. But, bringing in a guy like Jerry Jeudy could help. He has, excellent pass catchers with Amari Cooper. David Njoku looks like a stud. We always knew he was a stud, but, I mean, he is legit right now. So if he can't make it work this year, it's got to be him, and there's no more excuses at that point. But, yeah, last year, there's nothing you can really point to where it's like, oh, okay, maybe he's still got it. It was just everything beneath the surface, and like vision when you're watching him, he just doesn't look the way he did at the Texans.
Nope.
So it's really hard to see him regaining that form. You just hope that he becomes like an average quarterback at this point to like slightly above average, but it doesn't look like he's ever going to regain that potential top 5 form we saw in Houston.
Yeah, Browns are another team that had a very good season last year. A lot of things could go wrong this year. I mean, besides just Watson, now you don't even have Flacco. Jameis Winston is kind of like that, but you might trying to catch lightning in a bottle. Jerry Jeudy, I mean, there's people that don't like him at all. How will he fit in? Cooper's getting older. Like, is Njoku the same guy with Watson? Nick Chubb, who's been the heart and soul of this team and this offense, he's gone. Alex Van Pelt moves on. Like, there's a lot of changes going on with Cleveland. So yeah, I in this division, I like Cincinnati. I think Cincinnati really stands out to me. Among all these other teams, even though they had the worst season last year. But be sure to check out both our AFC and NFC editions of this podcast. That's going to wrap it up for this AFC one. And if you want more from Sean Koerner and I, you can find us on our other podcast as well, on the Fantasy Flex. That's where we go in depth talking about fantasy, best ball, getting you ready for your drafts and for the season. And Matthew Friedman, a longtime friend of the pod, former colleague of ours, he and I have our favorite NFL breakout candidates episode that'll drop Monday, plus lots more episodes here as the NFL preseason heats up. So be sure to hit the subscribe button and if you want all of that content, and we'll keep delivering it to you. Thanks to everyone for listening. We'll see you next time on the Action Network podcast presented by BetMGM. Until next time, let's get this money.